Hello, welcome everyone. We are just going to wait a few minutes for everyone to join us. All right, so I think everyone is in, and I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, Building Strong Roots, Tools for Strengthening Parental and Child Mental Health. We are thrilled to have you join us this evening to explore strategies and resources to help support the well-being of children, parents, and caregivers. I'm going to let our three experts introduce themselves, and we're going to start it off tonight with Dr. Maria Music.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Music. I'm a perinatal psychiatrist. I'm a professor in psychiatry and OB/GYN here at Michigan Medicine, co-director of Zero to Thrive, and also a medical director for the perinatal services and the Michigan MC3 program, which is a statewide program serving providers and patients in the perinatal field. So I'm very excited to be here with you tonight, and I pass it on to Kate Rosenblum.
Hello, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our presentation and discussion. I'm Kate Rosenblum. I'm a clinical and developmental psychologist by training and a professor of psychiatry, OB/GYN, and pediatrics here at Michigan Medicine. And with Maria, co-direct our Zero to Thrive program and also the infant and early childhood clinic that serves all infants and young children who come into psychiatry with their families. And I'm delighted to be here presenting both with Dr. Music and with Katie Bresky, who I'll hand the mic over to right now.
Thank you, Kate. Good evening, everyone. I am Katie Bresky. I'm a clinical social worker and provide therapy in both our infant and early childhood clinic, as well as in our perinatal and reproductive psychiatry clinic. Other roles that I'm playing are doing some additional research and program development, as well as clinic management for our perinatal clinic. Thank you.
Excellent. I think I'm taking it from here and kind of getting us started. So first of all, disclosures. We as presenters have no disclosure for tonight, other than to tell you that our work is funded by various sources, Zero to Thrive, the Washington County Mental Health Preservation Millage, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Kate, I think that you're moving your cursor. If you could just put the cursor to the side, I think otherwise we're gonna all be a little bit confused. Thank you. Okay, so what are we planning to discuss tonight? And kind of want to give you a little bit a roadmap. I will kick us off with introducing Zero to Thrive and our approach to thinking about parenting, early relationships, and how to promote mental health across generations, holding both kids and parents in mind. And then Kate will kind of take it from there and share some of the concepts and tools from our Strong Roots model to nurture early relationships and strengthen the child mental health. And then Katie will finish it up to focus on parents' mental health and how to care for ourselves as parents so we can be strong supporters of our kiddos. We will end with a question and answer period where hopefully we have a rich discussion and reflection. Okay, so what is Zero to Thrive? Who are we? We are a program within psychiatry, and really our work spans across, of course, clinical delivery, research, advocacy, teaching, community outreach. And really the goal for this program is to support families in their strength and to co-create solutions with them for a multi-generational effect so that inequity, trauma, and adversity can be overcome in the period from pregnancy through early childhood. As said, this is a multidisciplinary, multi-component program. And please check us out and check out our webpage. We have lots to offer, including our Strong Roots programming. The vision of Zero to Thrive is really a world of socially connected communities where every parent has a place to go to connect with other parents or with providers for a meaningful support for their kiddos so that they can parent their children with love and nurture. That's our vision. That's what keeps us going so that we can do our clinical and community and research work. So I want to kick it off with kind of, after decades of working with families and doing research and teaching, kind of three basic truths that, no, my apology. We are getting here some advancements that I don't want. Okay, we are with the three basic truths about parenting in an early childhood. And I want to kick it off with the first one. The first one is a very important one, is that parents' own upbringing story is not the destiny for them, how they parent, and not the destiny for the child's development and unfolding of their development. And so some research that we as a group did over the last decade was looking at parents, specifically mothers, who grew up with adversity, who had childhood abuse in their histories, and then following them as they transitioned into the journey to motherhood. And looking at their parenting, and we codified this as looking at features of positive parenting, so nurturing, sensitive, attuned parenting. And we noticed that there is not a direct line of your abuse experience to parenting. And we know that parenting, positive parenting, is related to the child's unfolding of biological and behavioral coping with stress, in such that the more positive parenting a child experiences early in life, the better they cope with stress. So there is a relation between positive parenting and child outcome, but there's no direct relationship between trauma and adversity to parenting. All of the effects of upbringing experiences to parenting went through current, in the moment mental health problems. And that's important because that means history is not destiny to parenting, but it's the present mental wellness that we can, of course, support and treat if impaired. So that's a positive. The second is that for the child, positive early relationships and relational experiences are protective. And so we know that any meaningful relationship, whether it's from parents, other caregivers, grandparents, other parenting figures that are stimulating, nurturing in early time period, ensure emotional security for the child. And that advances then subsequently physical, emotional health, social well-being, secure attachment, resilience, and ultimately healthy development. We have decades of research to support this and clinical wisdom. And the third truth is that parents don't have to get it always right. So good enough parenting, that means, at times, maybe even missing the mark, maybe not being responsive in the moment, not being as sensitive as wished for. Good enough, meaning at least 50% of the times missing, not missing it. So making that responsive and sensitive caregiving approach to the child is good enough. And that's has been, again, shown in studies that, that have followed parents in their parenting style and then ultimate child outcomes. So that's reassuring because we all get it sometimes not right. So what do young children need to thrive? Well, kind of looking at developmental psychology, I want to kind of give a brief background. The goal for caregiving is to promote what clinicians and researchers call the serve and return phenomenon. So what does this mean? It's almost like a tennis game. The child serves and kind of throws out a probe for interaction, a cue for interaction. And so is reaching out for this interaction through either eye contact, facial expression, an emotional expression, a gesture, babbling, or touch. And a responsive caregiver will return this serve, will return by the serve by kind of playing back, by speaking back, playing peekaboo, sharing a toy, laughing, mirroring the emotion. And so it goes back and forth. It's like a very well-oiled back and forth flow. The caregivers in this serving and returning the serve are playing a critical role for creating stimulating experiences for the child. And this reciprocity in the back and forth builds brains, so to speak. Well, what does that mean? Well, we know from, research, we have imaging, we have other modalities how to look at this. Also in animal experimental work, that in the newborn, neurons, and this is kind of a histological kind of marking of neuronal growth, that we have a certain set of neurons and synapses at the beginning of life. But in the very first years, in the first months and over the first 2 years, this web of neurons and neuronal connections, which we call synaptic connections, just grows tremendously. Millions of these neurons get established, and it's experience dependent. The more experiences, the more of these neuronal growth, and the more connections, interconnections between them. We know this also when we look at data that speak to the sensitive periods of these synaptic formations. Synapses are the interconnections between neurons, how they communicate in the developing brain. And you can see that a lot of these synapses, just when you look at all the curves, are established during the fetal development. So while the baby is still in the womb, but then also in those first years. So if this is birth, in the first 4 years, there's a lot of development happening, a lot of interconnection happening. And you can see here outlined some of the areas of growth. So from cognition to language development to seeing and hearing, you see that certain of these functions are actually developing across teenage years. So longer, that's the cognitive, but that certain are much more really happening prenatally and then in the early years postnatally. And at the same time, we see that some of these functions, for instance, language development and language expressive language, is also dependent on stimulation and is related to environmental factors. So we know that families who are living in economic stress, economic oppression, have a tendency to less communication, communicative expression that might be mediated by greater stress, greater depression that is interfering with kind of this fluency. I'm so sorry that it's forwarding. I don't know why. And so you see in this study where really by the level of economic wealth or opportunities, children were exposed to different amount of vocabulary and then also showed different amount of expressive language by age, with those with the most disadvantage, such families who were on public funding, that they had the least. At the same time, this daily back and forth of interactive experiences is kind of being in the mind of the parent, the relationship of the baby in the mind, represented in the mind of the parent, kind of thinking for the baby and putting themselves into the feeling state and thought state of the baby is, and vice versa, the baby kind of seeing and mirroring the parents' expressions and kind of watching the parent. This gets stored as a relational memory in the child. And these relational templates are then stored as attachment security. And again, good enough is what promotes relational health. So what a very wise researcher and clinician wrote in a very well written book, From Neurons to Neighborhoods, Dr. Shankov, he kind of summed it up, I think, in a really nice quote, to say, well, what happens during the first months and years of life matters a lot. Not because this period of development provides an indelible blueprint for adult well-being. It's not hardwired, it's not set in stone, but because it sets either a sturdy or a fragile stage for what to follow. So it's a launching pad for development. So good enough, we said, is good enough. Yet even good enough can be hard when families experience high levels of stress, trauma, isolation, or mental health problems. We know that when parents suffer, the children suffer. We know that when parents have a lot of trauma, social determinants of health problems like poverty, housing instability, food insecurity, they're more likely to be distressed, depressed, anxious, have trauma and trauma-related anxiety, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, and then might self-medicate or try to cope with using substances to calm their own mind and body. We know from research and clinical work that these aspects co-occur. So if in individuals who have trauma, substance use is very highly co-occurring. In individuals who have post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use is co-occurring. Depression and post-traumatic stress co-occur. So in order to support the children and the families in such constellations, we need to support the parents as well. Another big aspect is that social isolation is a detrimental environmental contextual factor. In fact, we have an epidemic of loneliness and isolation in this country and across the world. And the pandemic and being isolated and locked up did not help. And so we know from recent work, and the US Surgeon General kind of wrote this up and kind of wrote an advisory on this in 2023, that 50% of US adults actually report loneliness, and that people in childbearing age report the rates of loneliness. 1 in 6 adults feel isolated socially in their community. So with that said, loneliness and social isolation, particularly in the context of parenting, are critical social determinants of health and health equity. And socially connected communities have a much better positive multi-generational impact. And therefore, many of our treatment approaches with Zero to Thrive and Strong Roots are targeted towards connecting people in social group interventions or in spaces where they can join, be connected, and reflect together. In some of our metaphors, we talk about, we use nature to kind of reflect on development and social connections between parents and their children, and in our own social kind of developmental unfolding. And so we could say, like the roots of a tree that stabilize the tree and make the tree sturdy and helped the tree to thrive and grow, early relationships, children to their attachment figures, caregivers, are foundational for health. And with this, I will pass it on to Kate to tell us more about all these aspects in detail.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And I'm going to carry this forward a little bit to think a little bit more about sort of how we support our kids to promote their mental health and their best possible selves. And then Katie Bresky will pick up and sort of talk about, well, how do we nurture our own needs, our own mental health sort of needs, so that we're in a place where we can do that, linking to some of the work that Maria just described. So the first thing I want to say is just to build on what Dr. Music just said, there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. Prior experiences in destiny, we don't have to be perfect, thank goodness, because I know I'm not, and I'm guessing most of you who are parents are not either. But we can do a lot to really nurture and support our own mental health, and to nurture and support those early relationships with kids, which really helps to build their resilience and their well-being over time. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about a tree metaphor that we use. Maria sort of touched on this already, talking about how we use that to nurture early relationships. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we do that and share some of these tools with you. And to start, I'm actually going to just share a video with you so you can watch it along with me and, have some of your own thoughts about what comes up for you as you sort of hear what it is that we share here.
The tree represents ways that children learn, grow, and thrive. When a child feels safe and secure, she feels ready to explore, play, learn, and try new things. Yet even during these times of branching out, a child still needs a secure base, that is her parent or caregiver, to enjoy with her, to help her, and to keep her safe. There are other times when a child feels unsure, scared, hurt, or distressed. At these times, we say he has a need for connection. When parents or caregivers offer a safe haven for their child's feelings, they are meeting their child's need for connection and are nurturing and strengthening his roots. Children develop through the balance of exploration and connection, branching out, and building deeper roots. Parents and caregivers support this growth by providing a secure base and a safe haven for children to explore and connect. Children's inner core strength is built up, ring by ring, through daily experiences of having their needs met by their parents or caregivers when they branch out and build roots. This process begins in earliest infancy when parents hold, nurture, and comfort their child, and continues across childhood and adolescence. Notice that there is a balance between the reach of the branches and the depth of the roots. If the tree's roots are not as wide and thick as the branches, the tree is more vulnerable when strong winds blow. In order to be more resilient, children, just like the tree, need roots that are deep and strong that can help it weather the storm. The sun reminds us that both the branches and the roots need warmth and joy to grow and thrive. When parents or caregivers meet and welcome their children's needs with a sense of delight and acceptance, they provide the sun and warmth that helps their children not just to grow, but to thrive. Just imagine, if every child and family had strong roots, what a beautiful forest our community would be.
Okay, so in that video, hopefully there were a lot of things that might have stood out to you. And I'll just sort of share that that video represents a pretty complex theory and an abundance, 5 decades of research on attachment theory, and really sort of says how children can branch out and grow and thrive only when they have a secure base and a safe haven from their caregivers so that they can really feel secure and be more resilient. And when parents provide that kind of connection, it really grows and strengthens and builds those roots, making our kids more resilient and strong. And this is important because when we think about our children's mental health, kids are going to have all different kinds of things that they come into the world with. They may have differences in their development and abilities and emotion regulation, like their temperament might be easier, might be harder. They might have experienced some things that were very hard or stressful medical conditions. What we know is that while we can't always change the things that have happened or the things that we've come into the world with, we can help to build and nurture and support children's resilience through these relationships to optimize their best developmental potential and to really help them thrive. So everyone needs a good, strong relationship, and that will help them to sort of face things in the best way possible when hard winds blow. So hopefully that tree really helped you, if you are parents watching this, to think about how you are, providing those rings of support and helping your child grow deeper, stronger roots by meeting their needs for connection and to learn and grow and thrive by branching out. Why do we like a tree to capture this? Well, for a lot of things. One, it's intuitive. It makes sense. You need strong roots. And just like Maria said, like a tree and strong roots, early relationships are foundational. But also trees are flexible. They can bend and not break often when the strong winds blow. They're resilient. They can grow strong. They can survive in harsh climates and survive storms. And, that's something that we see people do too. It doesn't mean that there aren't impacts of those experiences, but what we see is remarkable resilience in people, especially when they have those relationships and the support that they need. When they experience those hard things, the tree doesn't often bear fruit or flowers, but instead may need to focus on the roots, right? We give extra nutrients to the roots so that they can really survive and thrive. They can be transplanted, but then they're more vulnerable and need extra nurturance and care. And I'd encourage you to think about what else makes a tree a really great way to think about those early relationships and the things that you're providing. I'll share that other people have shared things like trees look different. There isn't one kind of tree. There are a lot of different kinds of trees adapted to their environment. Encourage you to think about it too. We spend a lot of time thinking about the tree because it's kind of a core metaphor for us that we use in the programs and to help parents really think about how to meet their kids' needs and feelings. And we have a task that we do. We ask parents to draw a picture, families together of a favorite tree. And this kiddo drew a picture of a cherry apple tree, which is cool because it's Michigan. So it has cherries and apples. Very excellent. And he says in this that he really likes eating the apples off it, and I can draw them really good. That's why it's his favorite tree. And his dad decided to share that trees are great. It's perfect for bow hunting, this Michigan white pine, because it's green all year. So trees are resonant and people have special trees and maybe, oh no, oh my goodness. I wonder what it is about this that it's doing this. Oh, apologies. So I encourage you to think about trees that might be trees that are special or important to you, and might sort of hold special meaning because trees are resonant and we can relate to them. Trees, however, don't grow in sort of a neutral environment. They grow in a context. And so they have, soil that is supporting their growth. And in the soil, what we find often are nutrients, the things that really sort of nurture and support the growth of the tree. And that might be, if we sort of think about it symbolically, important others or memories of positive experiences with our own parents when we were growing up. There may also be things that we might think of as toxins or things that make it harder for the tree to grow. And these can include all kinds of things, including structural forms of oppression, racism, economic oppression, as Dr. Music was talking about earlier, things that really make it that much harder for parents to really nurture and support their tree, their child. And so we want to attend to the fact that there's a context and that all of us, if we really are serious about wanting to promote health and well-being and resilience of kiddos, we need to attend not only to supporting the tree, but to really addressing both the toxins and building nutrients in the soil. One of the things that we also know, and this was really illustrated in the research that Maria shared earlier, is that earlier experience is not destiny. So because people have experienced adversity does not mean we know how things will turn out. What we do know, however, is that there are certain protective buffers that we can help to build and to strengthen that will help promote positive outcomes. So that's tending the soil. And in tending the soil, we're thinking about how are we building strong relationships, strong families, and strong communities with social connection to promote health and well-being. So let me say a little bit about how we focus on supporting parents in using the tree. In doing the work that we do, what we're really thinking about is how are we going to help really enhance those protective buffers. And when we look across the research literature, we know that there are certain protective factors that really stand out as things that particularly help people to be resilient in the face of adversity. One is being able to care for yourself. So if you are a parent and you're on this webinar, stay tuned. Katie's going to talk a little bit more about doing that. And kudos to you for taking the time out to think about how you can support and nurture your child, but also how you can care for yourself. It's a really important thing, and we're going to talk more about that. Connecting with my people. I'm going to share with you a little bit about how we try to address that epidemic of loneliness and social disconnection by building programs that help people connect with one another. Being able to enjoy with your child, we sort of think of this as sunshine time. We know that it's not only about addressing things that are hard. It's about finding ways to find joy and connection, getting help when, there are things that are being faced that are really hard and a need for, that extra support. Where can you turn? And being able to do that really bodes well and predicts well for early relationships. And then supporting kids in their feelings and addressing our own feelings too. So knowing those protective factors, we developed a number of Strong Roots programs that were co-developed with parents and with community partners and providers. So this wasn't just done sort of by us, it was really a collaborative process by the people who knew best what they felt they needed and what would be helpful in their community. And what came from that was a series of Strong Roots programs. It started with a program called Mom Power, now in Spanish also as Mamá Empoderada, and then a series of other programs like Fraternity of Fathers or a program for military families, and other programs, including a parent-to-parent program called Parent Cafes that bring parents together to talk about those protective factors and share stories and experiences of how they use those protective factors to enhance and support their family resilience. So what does the research tell us about these Strong Roots programs? And I'll tell you a little more about what they are. What they tell us is that, actually doing a brief intervention, this is a 13-session intervention, can lead to really high levels of satisfaction and engagement with the group. It can reduce depression, anxiety, and trauma, and it can help families connect to resources in the community. So this is great because, one of the things that you might come out of this thinking about is where are programs, where are things that I can do? Mom Power and Strong Roots isn't the only option. There are lots of really great programs out there, things that happen in libraries or in other places. And this can empower you to think, if I'm sort of feeling a need to connect with others, I can look in my community for opportunities to connect with other parents, and that might help me to feel better, stronger, and more resilient. But even more important is a lesson that I'd like you to take away, regardless of sort of what kinds of supports you seek and access. And that is the research that we've done on the parental brain, really looking at with our colleagues who are neural imagers on what happens in the parenting brain when they participate in a parenting program like this. And what we have found is that when parents participate in a program like Mom Power, we see reductions in parenting stress, but also changes in the parental brain that suggest an activation of brain-based circuits that are associated with empathy. In other words, when parents are sort of looking at pictures of their baby expressing emotions, we see greater activation in the neural regions that are associated with more empathy or more sort of empathic responding, especially when their baby faces are showing joy. So they're in the scanner and they see pictures of baby faces and we're measuring changes in the brain. Why do I think this is so important and exciting? Well, I think it's important and exciting because even at the level of the brain, prior experiences in destiny, and even, short-term things that we do to help ourselves be in a better space can change how we're responding to our child, even at a biological level. And this is really powerful and really important. It gives us a lot of hope. This mom shares her hope when she participated in the program to sort of say, I didn't have these kinds of strong roots. I grew up in foster care. And now I see how important connection is, and I want to build strong roots with my baby. So these early relationships help build strong roots and build and sprout hope for what we can do as parents, maybe the same, informed by what we were given, or maybe differently. And caring for ourselves creates the opportunity for really being intentional about that. Of course, it isn't easy, right? When we look at our kids, they don't have thought bubbles above their head. So knowing how to respond empathically and responsively is one of the challenges that we are faced with. So, I like this little thought bubble because I think, wouldn't it be nice if kids and or our partners and our colleagues, anyone really, when they were having a feeling of being really overwhelmed or really stressed and they were acting out or they were being snide or sarcastic or they were running away or sort of turning in, if they had a thought bubble over their head that said, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed, I can't hear you, I can't think clearly, I can't respond to you. I just need your help to calm me and to feel safe. That would really help us know how to respond. But unfortunately, kids don't come with instruction manuals and we don't always know exactly what's going on in their brain. And so what we have to do is really think about what it is that they might be feeling, what they might need, and how we might respond. So what allows us to do that? What allows us to do that is something that we refer to as reflective parenting, and that is really the capacity to be able to take the perspective of another person and to think about, what are you feeling? What might you need? How could I respond? So this is an appreciation that behavior isn't just behavior. Behavior has meaning. There are feelings and thoughts and beliefs underneath that behavior and their mental states, like the child wants something or feels something. So behavior has meaning, and it's our job to be the detective to kind of figure out what that is and how to meet the need. And it allows us to be perspective taking when we're being reflective. We can be curious about these things. When we don't have this sort of reflective space, what happens is there's a stimulus. Our child, for example, is having a temper tantrum or throws something and breaks it. And what happens without that reflective process is we react. But when we can take that sort of reflective space and be curious and take perspective and think, wow, that behavior probably means something, we can put a pause button in between the thing that's happening and how we want to respond. So reflective parenting helps us to sort of shift from being reactive to being responsive. And that's our goal, because when we can respond to the feeling or the need, then our kids actually get their needs met and the behavior might actually improve in a way that also is helpful to all of us. So we have something called the wondering and response wheel that we like to use in working with parents and supporting parents. And I'm going to offer it to you here. And I will also point out that both the tree video as well as a video about the wondering response wheel, sort of explaining it and how you can use it, is available on our website in English and in Spanish and for free. And I think we'll put a link in if that hasn't happened already, so you know where to find it. But what this does is it really guides us through a process that introduces reflective functioning into the process of observing a behavior and responding. So we start in the upper right side. We say, what's my child doing? Is this a branching out moment or a moment where they need some connection to build roots? Then we sort of make that decision based on what our child is feeling. Is our child feeling sad or angry? That would be a need for connection. Are they excited and happy? Maybe they want to explore. Once we know their feelings, we can think, what might my child need from me? And based on what we determine from that, we can think about, how do I want to try responding? And notice that, in that wheel, there are arrows that go round and round, because we might get it right the first time or we might not. It might be that we try a response and it doesn't work and our child is still having that meltdown. And so we're thinking, maybe I didn't get the feelings, or maybe I want to try a different response. Like maybe my child just needs me to be with them for a while. To see what happens to behavior. It goes round and round. We don't have to get it right the first time, but we can keep trying. And this really helps us to put that pause button to consider, what might my child be feeling and what might he need? As I said, this resource is available to you. It's a really wonderful way to sort of slow the moment and think about how you want to respond to your child, because there's one really important true thing, and that is there is no one right way to be a parent. But what we can say is that when you're a parent who's thinking about, how do I bolster those protective factors, care for myself, connect with my people, and also how do I put that pause button in so I can be in response mode instead of react, that can be really powerful in strengthening and nurturing relationships. Now, sometimes your child might need more help. And this is important because even very young kids can experience mental health needs. Your relationship, as we've said, is always important, but your child might have anxiety or developmental needs or dysregulated behaviors or trauma reactions that would be best supported, assessed, or treated by licensed mental health care providers. So when problems are persistent or dangerous or interfering with development or your family's sort of functioning, ability to go out and do things, that's a time to talk to your child's pediatrician or a teacher to get appropriate, resources and referrals. And pediatricians are a really great source of that when you're concerned about your child. So now we're going to switch to thinking about how do we as parents tend to our own roots, because we've sort of talked a lot about what is it that you can do for your child. But, it is really important that we can only give when we are also being sort of cared for. And we work to care for ourselves, to attend to body, mind, heart, and spirit, so that we can really fuel ourselves up. And that allows us to fill the cup of our children as well. So with that, I'm going to hand this over again to Katie, and she can walk us through some of that.
Thank you, Kate. Okay. I am going to take us to the parent perspective and just thinking a little bit about those protective factors that both Kate and Maria talked about in terms of narrowing in on just a few for us and thinking about what it means to care for yourself and what it means to connect with your people. And I would say to connect with your relationships, including yourself, your relationship with yourself, as well as supporting feelings. So we support the feelings of our children all the time. And I would say it might be more of a challenge to support some of the contradicting feelings or the difficult feelings that come up around parenting or around our own histories, sometimes just even our mental health. So I think, many parents have not been given enough safe and supportive spaces to practice caring for themselves and often not always the permission. Sometimes even given the opposite message of caring for yourself shouldn't be a priority. They might have rarely, I can think of many, including my own parenting experience, where we might have not been able to give a story or put words to what fueled the beginning of becoming a caregiver and all of the complex moments that surround us as we care for our kids, as we're a part of a family system. There are many ways to name that. So when I think about caring for ourselves, I often, one of our programs, many of our programs actually rely on this idea of dialectics. And if we think about dialectics, we're thinking about the complexity of really being in relationship with anyone. So not just with our children, and that often all relationships come with many truths. And so if we looked at this idea and we said there's more than one truth occurring all the time, and those might be in contradiction to one another, that when we're thinking about being in connection with somebody, we're also thinking about our own independence and autonomy. And when we're thinking about a familiar rhythm, predictability of our routine or our structure or what it's like to be in relationship, we also seek out novelty and want new things to do. When we're thinking about openness and sharing and being vulnerable, and the joy that we receive from that, we're also thinking about things that we want to set boundaries or limits around. So as parents, we're thinking about these in the context of our adult relationships as well as in parenting relationships. And the context of these things change as we develop into different stages of adulthood and into different stages of parenting. Okay, so I want us to think about considering this idea of dialectics, that there are many ways to think about this in parenting, but this is one of the main ways that we think about it in terms of our perinatal DBT programming. So our programming for perinatal DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. It's a strong words program that's been adapted to really help be responsive to parents who are really wanting to understand the complexity of what it feels like to be with themselves and to be with their children, knowing that we aren't one way. And so if you look at this and you think about the idea of dialectics, again, it's the idea that there's actually more than one way of being, and that often those ways of being can be in contradiction, but they can both be true at the same time. So when we look at this dialectic, we can think about we all come with an identity, including our biological makeup, our social environment, our cultural context, what makes us us. And we're rooted in neighborhoods and environments around us. And as we're parenting and as we're living our lives, we're moving along these spectrums where some of us might find ourselves living in the present moment and really trying to be attuned to what's going on. And at the same time, there are other parents who will say, I am really trying to be attuned to what's going on, but I find myself just constantly shifting into the past and sometimes not even knowing it. It's just a feeling that sort of drifts off, or somebody reminds me of something. Or I'm experiencing symptoms of depression or anxiety that bring me back to maybe how I functioned at times that were really hard. And we want to give permission to parents to be able to move flexibly on the spectrum, to say, I can both live in the present moment and I can shift back to the past. And I can be aware and decide where I place my attention. But that doesn't come without a fair amount of practice. There's also the dialectic of trying new things and enjoying, and asking for help, coping with stress, and experiencing rupture, conflict within our relationships, and repairing that conflict. Where some of us might say, oh, I'm really comfortable going out and trying new things, and trying to enjoy and to have new experiences. And there's a fair amount of parents who will say the opposite, who will say, I really don't like trying new things. It creates a lot of anxiety for me. And I really want to stay close to my roots. And so they're constantly sort of coping with the stress and trying to survive day to day. And again, we want people to be flexible in their ability to move back and forth amongst these things. And the only way that we can be flexible is actually to practice amongst this dialectic. What does it feel like to go out and try new things? And that could be structuring your day in that I try one small step. If I'm somebody who's anxious about going to the park with my child, then maybe I go outside and I go around the block for a first time. Or maybe I invite a friend and we go to the smallest park we can find. And so thinking about trying new things doesn't mean trying things that overflow our cup. If we're somebody who really can't ask for help, that we have to be able to practice that, and that we want to practice environments that are more likely to respond to us. So we're thinking about what are the ways that folks can practice, who can you practice with, and what are some of the words that you might have to become familiar with, knowing that you've also possibly been in past environments that didn't respond to those words. The other dialectic we're looking at here is being with and responding to the feelings and needs of others. So that could be our children, it could be our family systems, it can be our jobs. There's a lot of ways in which we are responding to other people, and we're encouraged to do that. And on the other end of the spectrum is being with and responding to our own feelings and needs. And I would say that's often a bigger challenge when you're in a caregiving environment, when you are responsible for being with and responding to little people, or I will say even teenagers or early elementary age kids. They all come with big feelings. They all come with needs. And we want them to have those. It means they're growing and developing. But it can be hard to quiet those experiences in order to be present with ourselves. So one of the ways that we support parents in noticing where they are and thinking about that is thinking about this concept called wise mind. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video, and it's a video that you could also use with your children. So it's really written from the context of a child's point of view. And I think that's always helpful to learn these strategies from a child's point of view as well as a caregiver's point of view, so that you can translate back and forth about this is what I'm doing to help myself, and it's something that maybe you could do to help yourself too. I'm gonna go ahead and play this. Oh, you know what, Kate? I don't have the play button on here. Do you have that? Thank you.
What is It's Wise Mind.
Thank you.
Did you know we have 3 mindsets? The first is rational mind. This is where we make decisions based on facts, like when we're working on homework, if we're fixing something, or following a simple recipe. This is where we make our decisions based on logic. Emotional mind can make us feel really good or really bad. This is when our thinking and behaviors come from how we feel, like cuddling a puppy, yelling at a sibling, riding a roller coaster, or getting an A on a test. Wise mind is the sweet spot. It's the combination of both our rational thinking mind and our feeling emotional mind. The two come together to make wise mind, where we use our brains and our hearts. When we are in wise mind, we feel balanced. We feel good inside. It's the place where we feel peaceful and calm and that we know we're making the right decisions for ourselves. When we get quiet, we can hear our wise mind. Wise mind is like a really cool superpower. It can help us regulate our emotions and help us make positive decisions. Next time you're feeling angry, upset, scared, or annoyed, think about what your wise mind might tell you.
Okay. Go ahead and shift to the next slide. So, and when we think about this concept of wise mind, we're really thinking about creating, if we think back to reflective parenting, we're also thinking back about reflective interaction with ourselves and the environment around us. So we think about these 3 states of mind, knowing that by observing each state and figuring out where we are, we both name it, which means that we bring if we are an emotional mind and we're having big emotions about something, whether that is joy or anger or fear, that's a really important place to be. It's what drives a lot of our relationships. And it's necessary in order to be connected to other people, in order to figure out our value systems, what we enjoy in life. It's a part of what makes us human. In contradiction to that, or the opposite, or the dialectical, right, is rational mind, this piece that helps us think logically about what are the next steps? What do I need to do? It's that prefrontal cortex that we can pull online and say, okay, I need A, B, and C. But when we are in high emotion, it's really hard to access that part of our brain. And when we are all the way in this logical or rational mind, it's actually difficult to access emotion mind. So it's the idea that we're practicing being observant and reflective about what does it feel like to be an emotional mind. Some people might say, I feel more reactive, or some people might say, they might even share physiological sensations. I get hot, or my heart beats faster. We might also ask about rational mind. How do you know? What are the environments that pull that out? For me, it's often places that I'm familiar with. It's structure and rhythm, where I can say step A, B, C, and D, and I can just go through that process. It can be something like tying my shoes. But in that same example, if I take tying my shoes and I apply that to teaching my children to tie their shoes, I'm actually shifting a fair amount to emotional mind. And so when we live in the middle and we can name that, we can say, okay, emotion mind is saying this, rational mind is saying this. What can I pull out that are both true? These are both true at the same time. And what do I want to do with that information? Then we're responding from wise mind. And it doesn't always happen that we learn wise mind in the moment. In fact, I would say it's pretty typical that we're reflecting back on a moment and that we're pulling out wise mind points, and then we're practicing again the next day. So it's giving yourself the opportunity to slow down, reflect, make mistakes, do good enough, and then come back and say, my good enough also applies to myself. And I'm growing and learning when I understand these things. So in the context of some of our programming, we think about this word mindfulness, and mindfulness has a lot of, I think, definitions, become kind of confusing what people are referring to. So I just want to give us a context for when we're talking about mindfulness. in this space, we're talking about a way of being present in our bodies and our minds, of being present within our relationships, and then also within our environments. I can say, as a parent who is parenting two boys, my environment got much bigger, much louder, and much more interactive. And for people who are living in a sensory experience where it can be dysregulating at times to live in that, they have to reacclimate and learn how to be present, because there's a lot of joy in that as well. Additionally, with relationships, some of us, if you've experienced depression or anxiety or trauma in your life, or if it's difficult to be in the world because you're not sure the responses you're going to get, your relationships may have become reduced. You may have more isolation. And so practicing being in connection with adult relationships, with our child relationships, and then also within our body and mind. So I'm thinking about, parents who may have experienced mental health or physical health or both issues, that it's not always pleasant to be in your body or with your thoughts. And sometimes it's very pleasant. And so practicing how to be in those dialectical spaces in each one of these contexts is something that can really help shift us. And you may practice in the smallest of ways. You might say, in the morning, I'm going to connect with my body just by putting my hand on my chest and noticing, what do I feel? You might say, I'm going to scan my body in the morning. I'm going to notice from my head to my shoulders, to my chest, to my stomach, to my toes. Where do I notice some kind of tension? And can I breathe into that tension? And can I let it go? It's these small moments. If we think back to those neural synapses and that neurons firing together, over time, that practice and repetition allows these neurons actually to wire together and to create these ways of being that are no longer just states, but they become traits. This idea that they become a well-worn path, that we don't have to do so much thinking in order to get in connection. Think about it almost like when you learn to ride your bike, there's a lot of effort that goes into that. And then when you just ride your bike because you've been practicing it for so long, you just sort of hop on and you know what to do. So one piece that I wanted to share with you all is this idea of self-compassion, and the role of self-compassion in parenting and responding. I think Kate said this and Maria said this, and I can certainly say this about my own parenting, that I am far from perfect. I make mistakes all the time. We could interview my children right now and they would share that. And that they also know that's a part of being human, and that it's important, actually, that when I make small mistakes that we can all recover from, we actually get stronger, that they learn how to live in a world that can be more stressful. But when I make mistakes and I berate myself, or I respond to myself with no kindness, or with, think of sort of a background of shame or guilt or fear, those things can all be there. But if I don't also highlight the kindness, and really what I would like to amplify for my children, I'm sort of left with a hopeless sense of self. So I want to do a quick practice with us, and I'm going to ask you guys just to go ahead and settle into your chair. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or just focus your eyes in one place. It could be the ground, wherever you feel like settling. And I want to invite you into a time in the last week or 2 weeks where you might have experienced a difficult moment in parenting. I want you to choose a moment that's small enough that you won't get lost in the stress of it. Think about if a 5 was really, really stressful and a 1 was just a little, maybe choose like a 2. And I want you just to notice that moment. Think about the words you said or that someone said to you, the way people's actions impacted one another, or the feelings that were in the room. And we're going to apply this practice of a mindful snack. As a parent, I think we rarely have time for a full course meal. So the idea of a snack is very appealing. I want you just to notice and stop. By definition, that requires us to pause when we might be about to respond to ourselves in a really unkind way. You could picture someone with a stop sign offering you permission to take a breath. And I want you to notice what's happening, that N. What is happening in my body, around my body, within my thoughts? See if you can put names just to one or two of those things. Remembering that when we name something, we also tame it, right? We bring our prefrontal cortex online that helps us really be in charge of ourselves. And then I want us to think about the A. The A is definitely a tricky one. It's accept, but it doesn't mean accept the moment. It doesn't mean agree with the moment. It means accept the moment we're in. So being able to notice that it doesn't mean agreement, it offers us the ability just to put words to what it is. It might be being exhausted. It might be caring for multiple children. It might be living without the resources you need. It might be experiencing chronic stress or mental health. And just noticing what it feels like to hold those things. We're going to shift over to the C, and the C is curiosity. So just like that wondering and response wheel, we're going to be thinking about wondering and responding to ourselves. And we're going to try to ground ourselves in a question. That question could be something like, what am I feeling? And that's not always an easy question. If that one isn't grounding, you could look towards, what do I need? What's one need that could be met right now? And then finally, that K, the idea of self-compassion, is really responding to yourself with kindness, knowing that we will all make mistakes. We are all doing our best. And that really, in order to respond to yourself, you need a gentle approach that will allow you to get back on track. That balance of warmth and being in charge that allows us to be in connection with ourselves in a healthy way. You can go ahead and take a breath. Come on back together. And know that you can use this at any point. And I'm just going to leave us with these couple of thoughts. The idea that, oh, it's doing the thing again. Okay, there we go. The idea that it takes a forest, right? It takes an entire forest to support relationships. And that includes the relationship with ourselves and fostering the adult relationships around us. I'm going to start with this first one that says, honor your needs. Many parents enter into this transition with unmet needs while they're expected to focus on caring for others. Speak your needs out loud, even if it comes out with uncertainty. Your needs are important, and the chance of getting them met increases when you speak about them. Practice connecting. Connection and relationships are necessary for our health and happiness, and it takes courage and effort to begin new relationships and to foster the ones in our lives we have present. Acknowledge your strengths. Use your strengths to connect with others. Finding people with common interests and experiences can help us feel full and engaged in our lives, and is not an easy task as an adult. Set your limits. Parents, birthing people, and caregivers are frequently encouraged to care for others and do more than their part. Remember to set your limits and leave room to care for yourself. And this last one, practice self-validation. Practice self-compassion. Make space to care for yourself and make sense of your experiences. It will help you clarify your needs. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand it back over to Maria.
Well, thank you so much. everyone. And I would like to invite all of you, Katie and Kate, to come into this room, um, into the Zoom room. And I think it's time for questions, maybe reflections, maybe some takeaways that some of you might want to share. And I just put down also our webpage and our email addresses. So Katie is the first one, Kate is the second one, and I'm the last one. Bresky, Katie are in music. Um, if we don't address all the questions right now, just shoot us an email. We open the door. We want to be available for questions or reflections that we don't get to tonight. So opening the floor, and I think that we are we got some questions already that we kind of typed out, but I see there's one here, and I will just kind of read it out loud, and then we can go from there. Does this sound good, guys? Okay. So, what if the mother has done all the things to get help and support mental health, years of therapy, but the father figure does not value mental health and won't prioritize it for himself? How to get him the self-care he needs? Oh, that's a good one. It's a good one to kind of, you know, it's a struggle and it's a challenge kind of to see another person that you are connected to, that you are caring for, or that you are, loving, or where you are maybe in conflict, to feel we are not on the same page. And we are and yet understanding that we both need to be on some page together in the same space in order to support our kiddo that needs us both. So I have some thoughts, but I'm going to throw it to my two clinicians.
I'll say I'll say
Colleen.
a little about that. I was actually starting to type an answer. And I'll just say, first of all, another great question. And just as a heads up, in case people aren't aware, there are some questions that were asked in the Q&A that we've been typing answers to. So feel free to look through there and add more questions. But this is a great question because while I'm sure the circumstances are unique, I can really imagine that a lot of people can relate to the challenges of navigating differences in parenting styles or responses or how people are caring for themselves. So a couple of things. One, first, good for you for having done this work to care for yourself. That's really important. And it is a way of modeling, not only for the father, but also for your child, that like it's okay to take care of yourself and to get help and to, work hard to sort of be the best parent and best sort of in the best place that you can be. And a second thing that I will say is that we don't control other people, right? And so we can't control what other people will do. We can let people know, like, this has been really helpful for me, and I wonder if it would be helpful for you. Or we can think about resources or things that we want to share, but ultimately, sort of fundamentally, we don't get to make that decision for others. And so putting the sort of focus on what you have control over is a really good strategy. And it seems like something that you are doing in sort of caring for yourself. And the third thing that I will say is that we know that from, attachment research, for example, that having a positive and secure relationship with both parents is extra great. But having a positive and secure relationship with one parent also conveys really important protective value. And so know that, your, efforts to be sort of that responsive parent that you want to be for your child is really important. even if other parents might be struggling or in a place where it's hard for them to sort of figure out how to do that right now. They haven't found the right supports or the way to do that for themselves. So, keep going on that path and know that you're having a positive impact in caring for yourself and responding to your child in the ways that sort of meet their feelings and needs. The last thing I'll say is maybe not an answer for you, but I think as a profession, as a field, we know that it's often harder for men and for dads to access resources. They might feel like it's not sort of targeted towards them, speaking to their experiences as dads. And that's something that I think, we're really working to figure out how to constantly improve the kinds of resources and at Zero to Thrive that's really important to us, that dads and other parenting figures are, feeling welcomed and have programs and services that meet their needs, because they do matter too, but there's different kinds of stigma and there are different things that programs might do, like, inviting dads to, ask questions in OB visits, or inviting them in, to sort of share information in the pediatrician's office. They might be responded to differently, and that can really be a different challenge for dads than for moms or other parenting persons. So I'll stop, and maybe others have something to add to that. Great question, though, in a tough circumstance.
I think I'll just add one last piece and saying, I think there's also another value in being able to also translate that not all parents receive help in the same way, right? That some of us come through receiving emotional support and social support through relationships at church, through sporting events, through art, through music, and being able to find ways that those relationships exist outside of mental health care when that stigma exists, when it makes it harder. And this other piece about, I think, being able to be a bridge or a translation for our children around when they have people in their lives who are caring for them or who they love very much and who are also struggling, being able to give kids words for why that's happening in a way that is kid size and that is benevolent. My dog agrees.
Mm-hmm. Great answers. I have another question here that was posted. How do you have any tips for parents who are feeling overwhelmed and worried that their mental health is impacting their child, and feel guilty about it and feel that they maybe not adequately able to support their child? Different age, could be young, could be older, even a teenager. Any thoughts from you guys?
I think I'm going to come back to that piece that I was just talking about in terms of being a translational bridge for kids around mental health and diagnoses, whether they're depression, anxiety, whatever it is going on with somebody. Words make it manageable. They give a story, and giving words to what it is to experience sadness or what it is to feel tired or stressed in a kid-sized way can really help a child separate, like, no, you are not upset with me. No, you don't dislike me. That it's not about our relationship. I can think about many, many kids who have found so much relief in a parent talking about, I'm having a lot of sadness, and these are the things that I'm doing to get help around that. And that can lift such a stress that a lot of kids will carry because if they are young, they are egocentric. If they are a teenager, they are living in their own context. And so I think just knowing there's a lot of small ways to be able to also separate whatever is going on that is stressful from the relationship that you're building.
Also, I think, were you going to
No, go ahead, Kate, and I'll follow.
I want to say, we put such burden on ourselves as parents. We hold ourselves to high standards. And I want to harken back to the research that you were sharing earlier, Maria, about, being good enough and, knowing that none of us are getting this perfectly all the time, that, we also, I think, can worry a lot. So when we have mental health concerns, if it's anxiety or depression, for example, that anxiety or depression might also lead us to sort of ruminate or be worried about, have I caused irreparable harm to my child? Have I done sort of things that are going to, and what the research tells us is that those things are not determinative, and that actually it does matter that, we are, working to get the support we need so that we can be the best parent that we can be, that kids can turn out okay, that we can also, really find hope in knowing that kids can be resilient. And just like Katie said, that the things that we're doing to support and nurture that relationship are helpful and good. And, we know that no one is perfect. None of us here are perfect. And when we're struggling, I think the real key is sort of thinking what kinds of supports might be available that would be meaningful to you, that would allow you to get some comfort, some relief, and free you up to be the parent that you want to be more comfortably, more easily.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add on that um, actually in human development and in kind of nature, there's actually a lot of protective buffer built into the system. So when we kind of look at whether it's kind of in our body functioning, there's always kind of these rescue loops or kind of systems in place that are interacting. So when one organ doesn't perform as well, that maybe some another aspect of the body steps in. And similarly, it's in kind of early child development, and nothing is set in stone at one point. There's always repair. There's not a point of no return. And as an example that I want to bring is, all many parents that I work with are concerned. Many mothers are concerned, fathers as well, because fathers also experience postpartum depression, not as common as mothers, but 10 to 20% of dads also have mood issues, and moms similarly 20 to plus percent. And when they have a depressive episode early in the first year after childbirth, many of the moms are worried, is this being remembered by the child? Is this forever, shaping my child's development? And have I now failed? Have I not bonded, connected? And we actually know from, again, many, many, many studies that there is repair, there is restoration, that actually bonding and connection and attachment security is an unfolding process, that even if a parent might have mental health issues in this time period, that as they recover, that there is, so to speak, a catch up, and that relationships reestablished, are renegotiated, and kind of these roots might, even in the context of modeling down, I'm taking care of myself, actually get stronger. So the repair of a mental health concern or a disruption in the relationship might actually strengthen the relationship over time. And that is, again, shown in research, many, many meta-analysis. It's not one depressive episode. It's not two depressive episodes. It's if the person is seeking help and then recovers, the adult, there is healing both for the adult and the child. So I think that this is very reassuring to me as a clinician, as a researcher, that there is this positive kind of outcome that is possible, even if there is challenge and sometimes difficulty. There is always not giving up and continuing the work. And as Katie was saying, kind of staying in the moment, refocusing and saying, what can I do? What can I change? Can I not change? And staying on it. I think that's the way towards healing and health. Yeah. Another question would be, how do I support my child when they're expressing big emotions in a very challenging way, like maybe with aggression or acting out, self-injury, any of that stuff? Any takers?
Well, I also think we have some wonderful resources on this on our website. And I know that there were some posts that sort of link to a resources page. So peruse through there and see things that you can find. But I will say that a couple of things. One, noticing the behavior and thinking about that wondering response wheel. What is it that behavior might be telling you? Is your child having really big feelings and that's sort of showing up in the behavior? And if so, what might he or she need? Like, for example, might they need you to just be with them for a little while to help calm them down, or to sort of acknowledge the feeling, just to sort of say, wow, it looks like you might be feeling really mad right now. But to sort of have that feeling acknowledged. Might they need some help with sort of being in a safe place and space? We talk about how, feelings are okay, but behaviors sometimes need limits. So if someone is at risk of being hurt or the child's hurting themselves, we might have to be sort of strong and in charge and say, you know what, buddy, we're going to need to step away from this for a little while because I think maybe you're feeling really, frustrated or sad, but we can't hurt with toys or something like that, and to sort of take charge of the situation. I think there's no one size fits all for how to do that, however. So I'm throwing out, you'll see sort of these different ideas. But what I'm really thinking is that the process of sort of walking through that wondering response wheel is really helpful, because if you're anchoring how you're responding in thinking about what does my child feel and need right now, it can be really helpful in trying to identify things. So it might be a little bit confusing. Kids might, for example, act out or be aggressive when they're actually feeling vulnerable and scared. That's an example where it's confusing. And if you can identify, like, they might be feeling vulnerable right now, then instead of sort of setting limits about the behavior, you might try a response of, let me be with you, let me help, or let's do this together. This is really frustrating. So I encourage you to watch the video. I encourage you to look at our resource link. I encourage you to, sort of look through the materials and to think about, different ideas for how to respond. But I think the key is often really trying to understand what that behavior is signaling about how your child is, feeling and what they need from you in order to get back into a more regulated space. And when those behaviors are really big and persistent and they're perhaps feeling dangerous, or, you're stuck and you don't know sort of how to help, then I think, talking to a pediatrician or a trusted other who knows a little bit more about your unique child and family can be really helpful to find the right resources and support to help your family navigate that.
Thank you, Kate. This was a great ending, and I know we are at time, but I think kind of emphasizing, please look at our resources. Please look at our webpage. If you please come and attend our groups, or if need and you wish, come to our services that we offer. All of that is on our webpage. But I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and coming and listening. And we really so appreciate you and being here, and and doing the work that you do for your kiddos and your families, and yourself. So with that, I want to thank everyone, and thanks my co-presenters, and wishing everyone a great evening. Goodbye.